Stronger schools mean safer communities. It's a concept that we all should take under advisement. However, according to my friends over at Gallup, we've got to refocus our energies on that very objective. Gallup reveals that only approximately 35% of all Americans are satisfied with the quality of American K-12 education today. It's the lowest mark ever recorded in the nation's history. Public confidence continues to decline also, with only about 1 in 4 Americans believing today's schools are headed in the right direction. Even more concerning is only about 1 in 5 believe that today's schools are doing a great job preparing today's students for the modern workforce. And only about 1 in 3 Americans believe that today's education quality is preparing our students for college. These numbers reflect more than just statistics. They tell us a growing concern about educational quality, economic mobility, and the future vitality of our modern workforce. In this episode of Let's Have This Conversation, I sit down with my friend Taikein Cooper. He's the president of the Richmond Ed Fund, who holds the belief that great public schools do more than just educate children. They create safer communities, stronger economies, and more prosperous cities. For Cooper, this mission is essentially personal and close to his heart. He's always held the long-standing belief that Richmond, Virginia, has always been a city willing to chart their own course. And throughout American history, Richmond has often found itself at the center of some very defining and consequential moments. For Cooper, today that same spirit is being directed towards one of the nation's most urgent challenges, which is ensuring every child has access to an accessible, equitable, and quality education. For Cooper, growing up in historic Farmville, Virginia, he understands firsthand the value of strategic investment in children because he was mentored in that way himself. While he credits his role models along the way, he is quick to emphasize that far too many young people don't have access to those same opportunities or experiences, and he's on a mission to change that very fact. And he joined me this week to talk about how we uplift the quality of public education, his personal investment in the cause, and how educators, parents, the entire educational community can work together to achieve better equity, equality, and strength in public education today. So without further delay, my conversation with Cooper starts right now. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to learn about your commitment to equitable and inclusive education. It's great to see you and happy Monday to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and it's great to see you, and it's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Now, taking out, I know a part of your professional philosophy stems from the belief that great public schools make better cities and healthier communities, my friend. And I'm wondering why you believe that great public schools make communities and cities more prosperous. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yes, so a couple things there, Kevin, but I grew up in a subsidized housing community, and fortunately, my mom has run that community for the past 43 years, but um, I always heard people say that education was your key to doing something completely different. And my first job out of college, I was a counselor in a prison, and I quickly learned that 40 or 45% of the men on my caseload were illiterate. And and so they would say things and that really, really stood out to me about how their their inability to read really contributed to their life of crime, or their life of drugs and addiction, and so after about 2.5 years, I said, "Hey, I'm waiting too late to try to be impactful to these individuals, and so I need to catch them before they come to prison." And so that's part of the reason why I really um, I transitioned my work. I studied education policy, but I transitioned my work to K-12. Um, but it's a deep-rooted belief of mine because I've seen it firsthand. And I'm honestly I'm a testament to that today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, building on your last answer, I'm curious, how do you think the concept and term of equitable or inclusive education has evolved over the course of time, my friend?
Yeah, well, Kevin, I think in some ways, for a very long time in this country, we weren't even focusing on what we were teaching. We were focusing on who we were teaching, and if we would teach uh, girls or students of color. Um, and then the Russians launched uh, the satellite Sputnik in 1957. And then Americans said, hey, we have to begin, like, we have to focus on science and math, and we have to really reimagine our public education because we're falling behind. Um, and because we're falling behind, this is a national security risk. And so Sputnik was really a catalyst for an evolution of American public education. And so I've been arguing for several years that we needed another Sputnik moment. And I thought that COVID could be that moment, but we spent a lot of time focusing on who we were teaching, or trying to get back to normal instead of really reimagining public education as we know it. And I think now we have another Sputnik moment, and that it's AI. It's changing the world as we know it, and I think we have to transform public schools and education as we know it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, taking on, if there's anyone that is more proud of their hometown other than you, I don't think I've met them, my friend. So, you often say that your hometown of Richmond, Virginia, has never sought anyone's approval, and they've always moved on their own terms. So, I'm curious, what about Richmond's history and its character continues to inspire you? And how does that independent sort of a streak, my friend. How does that influence the work that you have today, and how are you constantly always connected to your hometown, my friend?
Sure. So my hometown is actually a small town about an hour west of Richmond, named Farmville, Virginia. But I've lived here in Richmond about 7 years now, and I think Richmond's history is a history of defiance, and Richmond kind of moves on its own timeline, even though that's something that frustrates many of us. Um, the Richmond way is kind of we're going to do it our own way, and one of the unfortunately one of the worst examples of that, but I think it's a testament to the culture here is Richmond was one of the capitals of the Confederacy, and for for the past 150 years, we've honored the Confederacy with these statues, um, and these Confederate monuments, which they came down in 2020, but that's kind of the Richmond way. Like no matter how the rest of the world changes, it's like this is Richmond. We do things a little differently, and I think I've tried to embody that for positivity now, and so in our work, there are things that other places would say, "Oh, that will never work," and I was like, "You haven't been to Richmond, or you don't know Richmond," and so we do things a little differently here. Our approach is a little different. Um, we are. I remember one of my college roommates used to say that Virginians were a little bit confused because we didn't know if we were Northerners or Southerners. And so I've really tried to lean into our unique identity and said, hey, like we why can't we do things that no one else has done? Why not us?
Yeah, absolutely. And take it just because I'm interested in your uh, uh, perspective. I'm going to be a tad bit selfish here for a second and ask you about public education for students with disabilities. So I will give you a little bit of context. So I am now 37, but I am a product rather of public schools here in Canada. I know that special education and education for folks with disabilities or students with disabilities is going under sort of an extreme home makeover over there under the current administration. In fact, they're looking to abolish certain portions of the special education department altogether over there in America now. So I'm curious about how do you think we can still elevate the voices of students with disabilities and create an equitable pathway for them to have an equitable education. What are your thoughts on the current state of special education in America today?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for this question, Kevin. And truthfully, we can talk about equity in education or even equality in education if we aren't doing things to serve all students. And, equity has become one of the words under attack. And, and so it's a word that I don't personally use as much anymore, not because I don't believe in it. It's like we don't necessarily need to create boundaries where we're trying to build coalitions. And so I just say, hey, we don't need to use the word equity. We just need to lead with it. And as far as how can we support students with disabilities, I always tell folks equity literally means giving the students who need the most. And unfortunately, in communities all over the country, I've seen people who say that they are ambassadors for equity until they see it. And then they say, oh, well, why not X or why not Y? Why are we supporting hashtag those students? And so the work that we're doing here at the Richmond Ed Fund, um, we try to center and ensure that we're meeting the needs of all students. So one of our new initiatives that we're really, really excited about is called RVA Builds. And so RVA Builds is creating pathways through pre-apprenticeships and youth registered apprenticeship programs for kids in skilled trades. And the ultimate goal is um, the upward mobility of our students, and so ensuring that they can have a true pathway to the middle class. And something that is really important for me is that we aren't just um, serving students who are great students or students who are marginal students, but we also have to ensure that, I've set personal goals and goals that my team are aware of ensuring that students who are in special education, they have access to these resources and our black students. And, when we talk about skilled trades, we rarely talk about um, young ladies in these programs, and so it's important for me that they also have access and exposure to these opportunities, because if we're talking about building a community that's safer and healthier and more prosperous, we can't leave anyone out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have also said that Richmond has also stood at the center of the American experiment since the nation's founding. And you've also said that the city has often led the country, sometimes in ways you're proud of and sometimes in ways you're not. But I'm curious, you've also said that that bold sort of stance has led you to ask yourself a different question in terms of the quality or the equity in education, in terms of asking yourself what happens to the children of the country that you continue to leave behind, my friend. And I know that we've talked about that briefly, but I'm curious about how do you think the thinking around that question has evolved over time, and you know, particularly for black students, how do you think we can continue to show up and answer that question with authority and impact, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
So, well, first, Kevin, you are incredibly prepared. You reminded me of things that I've said that I sometimes forget that I said, and maybe I talk too much. But um, so thank you for your preparation here. When we talk about um, the, I, I'll say this, and I'm happy to kind of dig in or pull on any of these threads. But when we talk about making the best America possible, a place that's safe and that we're all proud of, um, we can't leave anyone behind. And I think that sometimes, if we want to call it American exceptionalism, sometimes we forget about folks that think that that they aren't necessarily assets to, talk about this American experiment. And when I think about some of our largest contributors in American history, they've come in all shapes, sizes, and abilities, and genders. And so I always push back when people say things like those kids um or like we don't have access to programs for everyone. And I think we never ever know how um the work that we're doing today will impact someone long term. And my commitment is ensuring that we don't leave any stone unturned. And so in Richmond Public Schools, we talk a lot about a choice-filled life. And one of the things I think I'm most excited about as far as Richmond Public Schools is that um, in America, K 12 systems historically only focus on graduation. Like we assess schools in this country based on, or school districts based on their graduation rates. And part of our work and something I'm really, really excited about with our superintendent, he says, hey, graduation is step one. What are we graduating kids into?
Mm.
And we want our kids to graduate with agency and to have options to do things that they want to do and not be limited by what some adult believe that they can and cannot do. And so there's a lot of work to do, but we're making a lot of progress, and that's something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, taking on, you grew up in the historic Farmville, Virginia area, where you say that economic mobility wasn't always guaranteed, but you often credit your success to those people who made, the investment in your personal potential in order to grow. And I'm curious to ask you about those role models uh, that invested in you, but also about economic mobility and how that relates to equitable or inclusive education and the opportunities that you're hoping to garner with the work that you're doing in the public education system to grant mobility to more students. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yes. So, first of all, I'm a benefactor of people believing in me. And sometimes those people believed in me or they saw things in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And in our newsletter last month, I actually wrote about how when I went to it's my sophomore year of high school. I got called down to the principal's office like the first week of school, and I got invited to a pre-engineering academy. Today we'd probably call it STEM school, but it was at the community college, and I quickly said I had zero interest in being an engineer. And it was my seventh grade teacher who was in there, and a gentleman from the community college. And every excuse I had, they had a response for me, and they encouraged me just come check it out. I'm so happy that I did because that experience. So I started going to the community college half day, started my sophomore year of high school. That experience opened so many doors for me, and frankly, that experience is probably the reason you and I are having this conversation today. And I'm grateful that people saw potential in me and they took a chance on me. And um, that's the same way that I see our students. I choose to see their potential, and I want to do everything that I possibly can to ensure that they reach that potential. And so we we do some unorthodox things, but fortunately, we've had some success, and I hope to keep building off of it.
Yeah, and just before I ask you about the Richmond Ed Fund and full transparency and wanting to share inclusively, I'll tell you that one of the reasons I got into this work was my middle school principal taking on because, I was born with spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy, and I found out at the age of 9, buddy, that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life because of the severity of my cerebral palsy without a walk. So I found out at 9 years old that I wouldn't be able to walk. It was my fourth grade year of elementary school. It was the summer of 1998, and I had just been discharged from the hospital, and had to start my fourth grade year of elementary school the next day. And I credit my middle school principal, Dr. Carol Crowley, for sort of changing the trajectory of my life because, I was called down the first day of my fourth grade year to the principal's office because Dr. Crewley knew the reason I went to London the previous day, and she knew that I was going to be told that I wasn't going to be able to walk. And she looked at me at the end of me telling her the story of what the doctor had told me the previous day. And Dr. Crewley had everyone in her office that was assigned to my school file, from therapists to social workers, teachers, and my parents were also there. And she looked at me at the end of the story and she said, the only limitations on your life are the artificial ones that you placed on yourself personally. And ever since then, I've lived my life through the prism that everyone's portrait of success is different. So I'm curious to ask you about the importance of educational resilience and the role you think resilience plays in educational success today. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Kevin. I did not think we'd go down this path, but I also I grew up with a heart condition. I learned I had a heart condition at 15. And you know, I think educational resilience is one thing, but just having life resilience is another thing. And I think when I hear your story, I reflect a lot on the things that I encountered, and sometimes those doctor's appointments that were a little bit bleak and scary, and you're processing these things as a child. Um, and so when I think about my health conditions, I think it made me um, more determined. Honestly, it made me a better man and a better boy, and now a better man. And so I I share many of those same lessons that I think you've learned over the years. And I think one of the things that's really, really important, and a parallel in our stories, is that we had some adults who wouldn't allow us to feel sorry for ourselves, or to ever give up and to stop dreaming. And I talk a lot about being that kid from Farmville that still at heart. And part of that is just I'm a big, big dreamer. Yeah, and I think I was talking about just like resilience in general, and like that muscle that I think is has become a big part of who I am. And when we talk about education resiliency, um, I think it's a microcosm of life. And we talk a lot about education and life like they're mutually exclusive. And truthfully, how do we begin to draw this line and between the two, so people, and most importantly, our students, realize that these things aren't mutually exclusive? And I think that's something in America that we don't do a great job of, is showing, hey, like this is how this is going to relate to you in real life. Um, and we treat like school as this thing that's here, and then everything else is here. And so um, we have to I think we have to just make it plain and something that's tangible for our students as they become um, as they kind of navigate through the K-12 system.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to learn about the Richmond Ed Fund because I know you describe it as sort of a mobility investment fund rather than simply a funding program that you invest in. And I know it's all about funding high potential ideas with a private capital and then scaling those ideas to improve education, my friend. So tell me about the Richmond Ed Fund and the difference that it's making, my friend?
Um, so public education is perpetually underfunded in this country. And I think Richmond is a prime example of a place that's been underfunded, and there are a lot of reasons why. Um, Primarily just the way we fund schools in America. But one of the things that I found really early on when I came here was this idea of give us money because we're a nonprofit and we serve poor black and brown students, like you should give us money. And because it's the right thing to do. It was kind of this morality argument. And I really wanted us to move towards a business case for investment here, and really beginning to talk about the return on the investment that people make in us. And so we focus on two things. We started focusing on aligning and drawing parallels between the things that we're doing and the outcomes we want to see in the school district. And then we got really comfortable talking about those outcomes and set the expectation that people could hold us accountable if we weren't meeting the outcomes that we say that we were working towards. And using that and what I call the principles of like venture capital. Um, we've had some success. We've grown significantly over the past 3 years, but the most important thing is our educational outcomes in our local school district, Richmond Public Schools, has increased dramatically. And so our school district, we're up on all of our, we call them standards of learning, SOL tests, is end of grade tests. Year over year, we're improving. Our graduation rates have increased dramatically. I think after this year, we're going to be really, really close to the state's average, which is something that Richmond Public Schools hasn't been able to say in a very long time, if ever. Um, but our North Star has been the upward mobility of our students. And so, kind of going back to the superintendent's mission earlier around what are we graduating kids into, and um, my thing is we're graduating kids into possibility, and the possibility really to earn enough money to sustain themselves and their families.
Yeah, absolutely. And you often say that Richmond size is a competitive advantage, and it's something that allows you to accomplish things in education that it takes larger cities about 5 years to complete. So I'm curious to ask you about what lessons nationally do you think the rest of the country can learn about innovation and inclusion and education that Richmond has already have down pat? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, well, just as comparison, Richmond Public Schools, we have around 22,000 students, and New York City Public Schools has 1 million students. Um, our challenges mirror the challenges that you see in Richmond Public Schools or LA Unified or Chicago, um, Clark County in Nevada. Um, and I think that one of the big advantages is um, we are small enough to see impact and transformation really quickly. Um, but we're large enough that whatever we do matter. And so I've become very comfortable with this idea that Richmond could and should be ground zero for innovation in schools. Um, Now that is, if you think back to what I was saying earlier about Richmond not changing, that's kind of the antithesis of the Richmond way. But we are slowly but surely introducing new concepts, and we have a series of um, small bets that we're making here in Richmond, and really just trying to build momentum. And over the past couple of years, we've been able to do that. That has attracted some national capital, and we're continuing to try to build that momentum and do more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm also curious to ask you about building a stronger nonprofit community and how that helps the educational sector thrive. Because, as you said, nonprofits should be more than just giving money to support a common cause. So, tell me, how do you think the nonprofit and educational sector can work together to improve the quality of education? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so Kevin, I think there are a couple of things there, right? Like one, philanthropy as we know it is changing rapidly in this country. Um, and because of that, we have to change in some ways. Like we have to change our approach. Um, and we use um, the vernacular that we use doesn't sound like a traditional nonprofit, and so I kind of see um, the way that we traditionally try to address uh, or find solutions in this country kind of in three buckets. And so we have the public sector, so there's like government, and of course, government doesn't have um, like they aren't incentivized to move quickly. They want to study things. People don't want to do anything that they aren't sure is guaranteed to work with public dollars because elected officials lose their seats, and the public is kind of in an uproar. And then you have the private sector, which is industry, business. They always talk about moving really quickly and breaking things, and just like we'll ask for forgiveness later. And then nonprofits, we historically think about it using the lens of um, passion and really hoping for the best. Um, and so over the past 3 years, I've tried to build this organization to use a hybrid of all three of those approaches. And so we can move really quickly. We can do things that are the government sector would consider risky, but also officially our tax status is nonprofit, and so um, we can kind of be the best. We've tried to adopt the best practices of all three approaches um, to create solutions to our educational problems here in this country.
Yeah,
What about you?
absolutely, my friend. And I'm also curious to ask you about, I'm not asking you to divulge your political lens unless you want to, but I'm curious from a broader perspective. I'm curious to ask you about the ways you think political influence has affected the quality of education and where you think um, it's been helpful or hurtful in that regard. What are your thoughts then?
Yeah. So Kevin, it's no secret that I've been a Democratic Party chairman. I was a Democratic Party chairman for 6 years. Um, so I'll just be transparent about that. I think in some ways there are folks in this country and say, I wish politicians would stay out of schools. And truthfully, everything has always been political. I think over the past several years, we've seen people be a little bit more outspoken about their political beliefs and how it influences schools. But I'm not naive, and I would never ever say that we politics haven't been in school. Politics were in school when they decided that they weren't going to educate girls, or politics were in school when in my home community when they closed schools for 5 years rather than desegregate them. Um, Politics have always been in schools, and I think we are doing ourselves a disservice if we pretend like this is a new dynamic. Um, I think now we may see uh, people be a little bit more outspoken about their politics in school, and the impact that it has on schools. But politics have always been in schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to ask you specifically about black education and building more a robust level of success in that regard. Because when we look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, they report that only about 15% of black eighth grade students are reading at a proficient level, and only about 13% are proficient in areas such as mathematics. So with those statistics, obviously there are the more work to be done. So I'm curious, how do you think we can elevate the quality of black student education specifically, and sort of level the playing field for black students in particular? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach that we've been using hasn't been working for, your questions about Black students, and um, I think we have to change our approach. And there's a lot of research over the years on if we need more Black males in classrooms as teachers to help with Black student male achievement. Um, And I think that in general, that just some of the ways that we're presenting information is probably not optimal for certain students. I was a good student growing up, but there were times that I was bored, or I was just in my own world. And so I think in general, if we get away from this one size fits all approach and really begin to think about how we can tailor the educational experience to our students to meet their needs, um, I think we can really begin to chip away at some of the challenges we have and some of the educational disparities that we have in this country to have some outcomes that we're all proud of. Also, we have to do a better job of preparing students. I think we wait too late to do some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that you're passionate about is examining the question about helping students in underprivileged communities really maximize the heights of their own potential. And when we talk about maximizing potential in education, it means something different for so many people. So for you, in practice, what does the concept of maximizing potential in education really look like, my friend?
Yeah, I think so. Not to brag about the work that's been done in Richmond, Virginia, but we have a new initiative. Richmond Public Schools has a new initiative that we've been supporting called Passion for Learning. And part of the idea around this is that students will be able to choose a high school, any high school in the city, that they want to attend that's aligned to career clusters. And um, and so it's really this idea of kids exercising this choice, and instead of just going to a school and just learning um, uh, the traditional subjects and just been like, oh, well, you'll go to college. We have a school that's opening next month. There's a Richmond High School for the Arts. And kids can opt in to go to this school, and there's a huge arts component there, um, which I think is really exciting for our students because they're getting exposed to performing arts and graphic design and visual arts. And so we're teaching them things that they'll be able to use for the rest of their life if they choose to go to college, if they choose to enter the career, enter the field industry. And so I think that's the approach that we have to take when we talk about maximizing a student's interest. A lot of kids are bored in school and they're like, I'm never ever going to use these things. Um, and, you know, conversation if I didn't go to college. Every kid doesn't want to go to college. And so we don't need to pretend like they can't be successful if they don't go to college. So we need to equip them with the tools and skills to be successful no matter what choice they make.
Yeah, and taking on from your perspective, when you look at the overall health of education, obviously the woman who runs the educational department now is a billionaire, so she doesn't really have the wherewithal or the experience of equitable education and what that truly looks like. And I'm curious, from a national perspective, I'm curious to ask you about your perspective on the health of education overall. Where do you think we've made progress? Where do you think there's still areas of improvement? Where do you think we should go in the future? So, how do you assess the current quality and state of public education in America today?
Yes, I think we're at a pivotal moment in our educational system in America. Um, and as I assess the health, I think we have to do some things a little bit different than the way we've always done them. And that's why I'm excited about the work that we're doing here in Richmond, right? Like we are listening to our students and their families and the things that they really say that they desire in our educational system. Um, and we're building a system that's responsive to their wants and needs. And I think that is something that um, I have the privilege of working on here that lots of folks around the country don't have. But I think to really meet this moment that we're in, that's going to be mission critical for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to combine my last two questions because they're interconnected. And I wanted your perspective on the whole term of educational excellence and the whole concept behind that and how you think that term has evolved over the years and how it continues to evolve and change. And lastly, I'm curious about your own professional and personal legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
Yeah, so I'll start first with educational excellence. You know, I talk a lot about and with my team about this idea of um, what I call education speak, and I think we put words together and they sound good, they sound nice, and so we just continue to use them over and over. Um, but when I really think about the things that we should be striving for, I think about Richmond Public Schools. Albeit we aren't perfect, and like I said earlier, we have a ways to go. but we really, the moniker here in Richmond Public Schools is that we teach, lead, and serve with love. And so everything we do, I like to think that we do it out of love. And sometimes we have some hard decisions to make, but give you an example. Last year, unfortunately, we lost water here in Richmond for a week. The entire city lost water. We had um, an issue at our water treatment facility, and we just didn't have running water in the city. The superintendent called me and said, "Hey, Taikein, we have our students have been out of school for the past 2 weeks on winter break. Um, can we figure out a way to support our families?" And we quickly went to work, and we provided meals to families 2 days a week, no questions asked, completely free. But it was all about trying to meet the moment and accommodating our students, our most vulnerable people. And I'm really happy that we could serve in that way. And I think because of that, people know that they're loved here, and we're seeing academic progress, but we're seeing um, stronger individuals, and our students are becoming more well-rounded. And that's something I'm proud of, and I play a really small part in it, but I'm really proud to be part of that. And I think that really segues into something that I don't think about, which is legacy. But I ultimately, I hope when I'm gone and my successor is here, I hope that they say, uh, Taikein transformed this organization and helped transform Richmond Public Schools and made it a blueprint for what's possible in public education in America. And that's something I would consider the highest honor I could have when I leave this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you or the good work that you're doing through the fund that you run, my friend. What's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, so I'm the only Taikein Cooper in the whole world. I'm on social media platforms. I'm no longer on Twitter, but I'm on uh, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and the Richmond Ed Fund's website is rps.fund, Fund. Um, but yeah, love to stay connected with your audience. And Kevin, I hope you and I stay connected. And if there's some way I can be helpful, I'm happy to do so.
Well, fabulous. As someone who values equitable education, I think you're really giving the people of Richmond a great start to be a forward-thinking visionary when it comes to education. I truly valued this conversation, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Likewise, Kevin, thank you so much, and stay in touch.